6:30, so it's time for what we're reading. I am back in my own library with my own hubby, Mike Z, formerly a librarian at the Kellogg'sville branch. And I'm Penny with Amy Van Andel branch, and we're here to talk about what we're reading. And I'm always very excited for many reasons to bring Mike on my show. Um, a few years ago, Mike, I wouldn't think you read a lot besides a Clive Cussler book here and there, or a Patterson, maybe a Grisham. But since I've known him, he's really discovered KDL's audiobook collection. He does downloadable audiobooks. If this gray haired guy can do downloadable audiobooks, so can you. And
All by myself.
he listens to them in the car on his commute back and forth. And he has read so many books. I was always the bookish one, the librarian who's reading tons of books. And he is lapping me now just with audiobooks in the car. So, Mike, tell me, you want to talk about some books you've been reading. What are you reading?
First of all, for all those plaque readers out there, this is your show, okay?
And what do you mean by plaques?
Historical plaques. So you're visiting places. There's a place we can go read some history plaque. We were in Connecticut recently, and they have lots of plaques there. If you're in the vicinity
That's a history.
of Norwalk, where were we?
Norwalk.
Norwalk. Lots of plaques, lots of history, lots of neat stuff. But getting back to books on the Libby application for KDL's audiobooks, it can't be, you can't have a flip phone. Okay, if you got a flip phone, then you got to upgrade. But I'm a Walter Isaacson fan, and one person in history that's just fascinated me is Leonardo da Vinci.
I'm going to show you the book cover because I love book covers.
So interesting, fascinating history. And just to back up a second, not all books work out in the audio genre. Once in a while, it just that when they flip back and forth in time, like there was the Lincoln book. Who's the author that wrote Team of Rivals?
Oh, Doris Kearns, good one.
I've tried doing that with audiobook, and it just didn't work. There's some tough reads out there that it's just better to have in front of you. But Walter Isaacson's Leonardo da Vinci book was just fascinating, interesting time in Italy's history, and his perfect timing to be there, and the opportunistic kinds of things that came up, and how Leonardo, I have one thing alike, not the creativity aspect by any means, stretch of the imagination, but I can't finish a project. Leonardo finished a few, and I don't think he considered Mona Lisa done.
Really?
No. But he was, I don't know if it was a perfectionist or his history, his study of anatomy, which he should have published but never got around to. One of those things. He had journals and journals and journals of history of drawings, of anatomical drawings that just never made it to print. And anyway, Leonardo da Vinci, the artist, the inventor, the scientist, just a fascinating read, and it's a great read. One of Walter's recent books, Code Breakers, the history of breaking the DNA code and double helix.
I can show that cover too. Code Breaker, also by Walter Isaacson.
And just a side note, I mean, women were so incredibly important to that discovery. And of course, they were all collegial until money. Then it became, a race to get things patented. But
so I noticed there's a woman on the cover of that. So is the book about a woman codebreaker?
No, it's there's several featured inventors, scientists, but I don't know if there's a protagonist really. But there's a lot of women involved. Basic research that led places, and people were sharing things at conferences. And when things kind of got to the point where it's like, we could monetize this, then it became, okay, whose paper was published first, and years of litigation. But the early science is fascinating, and it's very readable. You don't have to be a Scientific American buff, if that's the publication out there. It's a very layman-friendly history. Walter writes, for John Q. Public, and it was really, really interesting.
Now, was code breaking really started in World War II?
No, it's nothing to do with that Enigma code.
Oh,
It's the DNA code. The double
gotcha.
helix, and how those 4, 5, or 6 proteins make everything up in a cell.
Okay.
And it's fascinating how you can manipulate that and create.
So I always think of just Watson and Crick. There were more people than that involved?
Lots of people were involved in that.
Okay.
Don't ask me exactly who and what percentage. But it was interesting, very interesting. And just that, like I said, the collegialness, and then in come the attorneys that ruin everything. So.
Did it seem like there were a lot of people working on this at the same time that were kind of coming to the same conclusions, but not necessarily working together at first? It was just like the time for DNA code cracking? Or was this a concerted effort where people were discovering this together?
It wasn't a Manhattan Project at all. It was a bunch of different people that were kind of thinking, this is the link. This is critical information. This is foundation level, and it needed to be studied. And not with any, testing or, mapping the genome. None of that was even considered. But it's just like, this is the building blocks of life, and it needed to be studied.
Now, in a book like this that's really technical, does Isaacson give us dialogue? Are people talking to each other? Does he talk about people's thoughts? Does he do that? Or is it strictly third person?
No, he goes, he kind of has that dialogue between colleagues, like you're there. And
does it read like a novel almost?
Yes, it does.
Gotcha.
Yes, with science thrown in there.
Because it sounds like that could be a really dry subject.
It could be, but Walter does a nice job. It translates well into kind of a novelistic science, inventor, discovery. It's all those things.
Gotcha. And you really enjoy the audiobooks?
Oh yeah.
Do they have good narrators?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, yes. I didn't say that earlier, but some books don't translate because of just the bouncing back in history or different characters. But the other thing is you need a good narrator. And I checked out Libby books just recently, and it sounded like the recording was made, I'm dating myself, but you can tell by the gray hair, in a phone booth. It's like, you're serious. And it was a major publisher. It's like, how can that be? But it was, I listen, I don't, I use my phone. I don't hook it up to the Bluetooth and all that stuff. Yeah, I don't know about that stuff. But I listen to it on my phone, and so the sound on the phone is good. I have an iPhone. Not an iPhone. What is it?
That's okay. You digress. I'm going to show the two Isaacson titles again. Both of them great on audio. Both of them probably also great to read. We've got Leonardo Da Vinci and The Code Breaker by Isaacson. And I'm going to interrupt you.
I could go on and on.
I'm going to talk about my most recent read, what I've been reading, which is We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Fowler. Now, I've seen this book. It's been around since about 2014. It's won a few awards. It was shortlisted for the Man Booker, and I think it won another one as well. So it's done really well, and I've seen it at the library. As a librarian, you come across these books that keep going out and coming back. So, and it was an interesting title. We Were All Completely Beside Ourselves, but I didn't know much about it, and it's one of those, okay, I finally have to grab it because it's still been around. It's got staying power. There must be something good about it. And it was not at all what I was expecting. It was so fascinating. It's a novel about a family, and the parents in the family are scientists, psychologists. We're talking in the early 70s. So they're doing experiments just about human behavior. And the experiment this family developed was to raise a chimpanzee along with their baby. So, they have a baby who's a couple months old, and they get a newborn chimpanzee, and they raise them together as if they're twins. So everything they do for one, they do for another. The two are always together. The little girl's named Fern, and the chimpanzee's name is completely escaping me right now, as names tend to do. But she thought of this chimp as her sister. And they had a big brother, and the big brother thought of both the twins as his little sisters. And he was very protective of them. He was a very good big brother. And he had one little sister who was more proper, and one little sister who would, fling things at you sometimes. But they talk about the similarities between humans and other animals, some ways in which her chimp sister excelled. She was much more advanced physically in a lot of things. She could do a lot of physical things before the little girl could, and there's some things that the human excelled at, and there were some surprises there. There were some jealousies, mom likes her better, or, and because also raising them was a bunch of grad students who were in on the experiment. So they had a favorite grad student. Matt likes her. He always wants to do her side of the experiment. So it was fascinated to see how all that happened when she was just a little girl, and she just loved this chimp. And then around about the time she was 5, she was gone. And the book kind of delves into what happened there. And we go back and forth in time, and we go to her brother's point of view, who her brother becomes a very radical animal rights activist, to the point where the FBI is searching for him, and what happened to their parents in the future. And then they're kind of drifting back and very slowly revealing what happened to the chimpanzee. And it's just a really fascinating look at the differences between humans and other animals, the similarities between animals and humans, and the mistreatment, the cruelty that happens, some of it may be avoidable, some of it not. It was fascinating, and it was a really interesting read. And the point of view of the little girl who was her twin was just really enjoyable. She had a great voice. She was 5 when all of this happened. So some of it, she blames herself for things, but she was 5. And I really just loved it. If you want a good book club read or something that you could really talk about afterwards, you want to read it now?
I think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike usually doesn't want to read the books I want to read.
No, she hasn't talked about one. What about Somebody in the Sun? Somebody's
Clear on the Sun. I talked about it in another.
That sounds really interesting.
Okay, I'm going to go back to you now. You've got 2
Sci-fi.
more you want to talk about.
All right. So in the history, let's wrap up history. So, okay, who made the first map of Great Britain? We know William Smith, son of a blacksmith, a commoner. And it's an incredible story about this gentleman, The Map That Changed the World.
Thank you. That's the title I was making. Tell us the title. The Map That Changed the World by Simon Winchester. And I'm going to show you the book cover. And here's another one you listened to. Did that one have a good narrator?
Yes. Not British, but very close in
He
voice.
likes British narrators.
Yes.
So the map that changed the world, what map was that?
Map of Great Britain, 1700s. Coal is king. They were scouring the countryside for coal, and then how to get it to market. To London was the major market, and William Smith was just fascinated by geography wasn't a science, and the strata. There was mines in the area, and he was just fascinated by. As you go into these old style coal mines, in the vertical shaft coal mines, you would go through the layers of earth, and he noticed that those patterns repeated themselves throughout the country, and he could predict based on the kind of the topography of the land if coal was promising to be in that location. He was part of a team that was developing a canal system that could bring coal to market. Fascinating story. His map was stolen, and in the end, amends are made, and he's kind of credited for being the father of geography. And interesting story, kind of in that black reading genre. But this commoner just had this obsession, traversing Great Britain by horseback and making maps along the way, all over, and it was just amazing guy. So
now. So you did have, this was nonfiction, obviously. So
yeah, nonfiction.
Did this one read? Was there dialogue and?
It's from William Smith's perspective.
Kind of dry.
Oh no. It takes a few minutes to get into the character. It starts off he loses everything because his idea is stolen, the map is published, and another guy is getting the royalties on his work. And it was just, it does get better. It just the study of this man's life, it changed Great Britain. They having a map, 1700s of the entire country is a very useful thing to have. It's kind of on the obscure side, I have to admit that. For the plaque reading crowd, it's nonfiction. I thought it was interesting.
Great. Well, you get excited about finding out new things when you're so curious. So if you have a curious mind about history and what happened.
Yes.
Great. And this next book that you're going to talk about, I'm going to say first that Mike does this a lot. He'll stop in the middle of a book and have to tell me what's happening, or have to tell me what just happened, or what he's read, or did I know this? And he did this a lot in this book. So you take it from here. So
I spent a little bit of time in Austin, Texas. Austin adopted this musician as a son, adopted son, favorite son, something, whatever the term is. And he was from all over the place because the family moved around a lot. But I'd been to some of his concerts, and he would play and the place would light up. So Texas Flood, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
So this is a biography of Stevie Ray Vaughan, and he was a musician, if you didn't know. And Texas Flood.
Yes.
It was written by Alan Paul and Andy. I'm sorry if I say your name wrong, Andy Alador.
This was kind of hard to listen to, but the subject matter was interesting because they went back and forth in the band. The band evolved. There were different characters that kind of came and went in the band, but the narrator would say who was speaking first. So and so says, and then it would be a short quote, and then so and so says, and it had the managers early on, his brother.
So what kind of music did Stevie Ray Vaughan play? Would you call that just rock music?
Blues.
And was he primarily a guitarist?
Blues. That's all he did, yeah.
Okay.
It was one instrument. It was the guitar.
Gotcha. And did he live a hard life like most musicians of that day?
Yeah, Stevie was hitting his stride. He'd couch surfed for years. Just dropped out of high school. He was making amazing amount of money in high school in bands, played all hours of the night, and sleeping through school.
We don't condone that, by the way.
No. I taught school. Don't sleep, students. Any students out there, don't sleep through school. But he found his way with drugs, and then later in life gave them up completely, and he almost died. But he was sober the last couple of years of his life. Was so influential to a bunch of musicians. It's a great story about the tour that never happened with David Bowie. And it's just this Stevie. He did his own thing, and he didn't care what you thought. And he was quite an amazing talent, and just a senseless and tragic death, and just great story.
Was he ever part of a group, a band, or was he always just solo?
Kind of a Stevie Ray. It was Stevie Ray, and everybody else was supporting Stevie Ray because people just stopped in their tracks when Stevie got up on stage from the time he was like 14.
Did he sing, or was it just his guitar?
No, Stevie played. And not much singing. There was some, but it was blues. So there's some singing, but it was Steve's guitar, Stevie Ray's guitar. That's Steve. But interesting story. If you like Stevie Ray Vaughan. If you don't, then don't pick this book up. You have no interest. But audiobooks, give them a try. They're a great read. I have about a 20-25 minute commute. You can get through a book easily in a month, something like that. I go visit a friend, I put it in. I drive across town, I put my phone on. So even, 15-20 minutes, you get through a book. And most of the books are between 6 and 12 hours. There's some marathon books out there like Hamilton. fabulous, but it's like 30 hours.
Book is this like?
Yeah, and I recommend that, by the way. But you can break that up. History of Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, is fascinating. It breaks it into segments of his life before, during, and way before his presidency, his life in Illinois and as president. It's just fascinating audiobook. So yeah, Libby app there.
That's okay.
Libby
Go
app.
to kdl.org and look at ebooks and downloads and check out Libby and Hoopla as well. I know you've listened to a lot of books on Hoopla.
Yeah. Don't ask me for titles right now.
Yes.
But it's a good one too. That's real good. The Libby app is really user friendly. You can have some presets. Like I favorite. You select audiobooks, and then biography is my go-to. And
history too.
Yeah. And I did an Agatha Christie. That was fascinating and a quick read. Agatha doesn't waste any time. People are popping off here, there, and everywhere. Man, it's like a 7-hour book, and it's like, oh my gosh, who's dead now? But it was real good. So you can select audiobooks, and I default to available now. And I've put in requests.
He's always in a hurry.
No. I do have requests out there, but sometimes, a newer book you can wait weeks for, even months. So when they come up, you take them, of course, but they kind of estimate, it's going to be about 12 weeks before you get that book. So you can get something else then. I'm saying, just pop into that one. Oh, it's a bestseller, Mike. Pay attention. So anyway, audiobooks, love them, but, give it a try.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Please come back next Tuesday at 6:30 to hear what someone else is reading. Keep reading and keep checking out KDL. Thanks so much.